Dadhood. Modern Dadhood podcast.
Susu Studio.
What did Phil Collins actually mean? Somebody knows.
Phil Collins doesn't even know. You know? Why don't we record an episode of Modern Dadhood, in fact?
I like it. Would you like to be the person who tells listeners what Modern Dadhood is? Our log line, so to speak?
For the listeners, anything. This is Modern Dadhood, which is an ongoing conversation about the joys, challenges, and general insanity of being a dad in this moment. And this one too. You get the picture. My name is Marc Checkett, and I am a dad to twin boy 6-year-olds who refused to go to bed this evening.
Is it because it's literally light out until like 8:30 p.m.?
We were having too much fun. We went outside. There were suddenly many neighbor children in our front yard, and then some dogs showed up. There was a coyote at one point, I think. It was a lot of fun. We spent some time turning over rocks and searching for bugs and didn't give a hoot about the time, and it was wonderful.
I'm glad you had that experience and nobody got eaten by the coyotes.
I think it was a coyote.
My name's Adam Flaherty, and I'm a dad to 2 daughters who are 10 and 7. And we also had kind of a nice little evening. Had a little ice cream tonight. So for listeners, if this is your first time listening to Modern Dadhood, because we do have some people who are just finding out about us now, Marc.
They're just hopping on the old Modern Dadhood train.
Yeah, if that sounds like you, welcome. I hope you enjoy what we're doing here, and we'll get into an interview very soon with a fascinating guest. But just to give you a quick rundown of what to expect with Modern Dadhood, it's Marc and me, and we're not parenting experts. You can find other great podcasts for that, but we do love talking about fatherhood and examining what it means to be a dad in 2024. We have some great guests. We have a huge backlog of episodes that you can find at moderndadhood.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
If we're going there, we should say Hark Audio, because I created I created a Harklist, man.
Oh, I want to do something else too. I want to thank Pocket Casts just out loud with my voice, because we are a sponsored podcast on the kids and parenting category of the Pocket Casts platform. Yeah. Isn't that great?
It's kids and family, Marc.
That's what I said. Listen, on to Hark Audio, man. Tell the people about what our Hark Audio is, what differentiates them from the others.
All right.
And then tell them about the fancy thing you did.
So when Stitcher went away, I was very disappointed because I loved Stitcher, and I've been looking for a new podcast listening platform. And when I was at the Podcast Movement Convention Evolutions in Los Angeles back in April, I met the folks behind Hark Audio. And what I love about it is, just like any podcast listening platform, you subscribe to all your shows. It will let you know when there's new episodes and, all the stuff you would expect. But there's also a feature called Harklists, and they have the daily Harklist, but they have Harklists on all sorts of categories, and they have a staff that curates these lists, but also users can create their own. And so, for example, I created a Harklist on the theme of the question, sort of raising the question of how important is it to have a paternal figure in your life as a young person, whether it's a biological dad or just another father figure. And I went back through our archive of episodes, and I pulled 5 or 6 episodes and extracted some sound bites, short, several minute sound bites from those episodes that all fit within that general theme. And so I created a Harklist on it. I've shared it out on I think I shared it on our social media. If I haven't, what the heck am I doing?
I don't know. You shared it with me, which I really appreciated.
But I'm going to continue making Harklists for Modern Dadhood, and also just other parenting related podcasts, grouping things together by topic, because I think that this mixtape format is really interesting, and cool. I think it's really going to catch on. I think Hark is on the verge of blowing up. And now I've said it. And so when it happens, I'm going to go back and point everybody to this episode and say, I told you so.
Called it.
So check out Hark Audio, a free download in the App Store.
It's a new way to explore with your ears.
There we go.
Says the hero image on their website.
Today's guest is Sean Hotchkiss, who is a men's coach. He's a somatic practitioner, and we talk a lot of things mental health, including grief and suicide and working through traumatic experiences from your youth. But
big emotions.
Don't worry. It's not a downer of an episode. It's actually a really great and interesting conversation. Yeah. I think you're going to be fascinated by the work that Sean does and what he talks about in the interview, which will be coming up very soon.
Interesting factoid, not a dad, but did not hold us back from having lots of convos about dad stuff.
I want to waste no more time with formalities or just gabbing. Let's get into it. Let's
get into the interview. Why don't you play back the tape?
Can you say something to the effect of, in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we present to you our interview with Sean Hotchkiss. Go ahead.
So let's not keep our friends waiting any longer. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month.
Okay.
What did I say? Did I say that right?
Yeah, but do it again.
In honor, I would like to dedicate this interview to.
This is going okay, but can you try it again?
So in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, let's play back our interview with Sean Hotchkiss.
You nailed it. Sean Hotchkiss is a men's coach, a somatic practitioner, and an embodiment guide. He's one of the small handful of guests of this podcast who is not a father himself, but he is a coach to many dads. And I think that dads listening will find all the work that he does very interesting. Sean, super psyched to have you here. Thanks for making time.
Thanks, Adam. Good to see you, man.
You too, yeah.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, get in there and do it, Marc.
Do you guys know each other?
We have a history, yeah. So we should probably disclose that out of the gate. That Sean and I have known each other for a lot of years. We were in middle school together, and then we've had like very little contact since then, and that's now been almost 25 years, probably.
Couple of old guys.
Well, it's great. It's great to reconnect, and I'm psyched to talk about what you're doing now. I'll say that on and off, I've sort of, followed along with what you've been doing with writing for some really impressive magazines, writing about fashion. And it seems that at some point in the past, however many years, and you can share with us, you've kind of made a pretty significant career switch to do this coaching. And I would love to kind of hear what led you to this work.
Man, for me, that's like there would be the 7 hour long answer. And that would be the short one. But yeah, I guess, just kind of touching, Adam, on what you, on the points that you made. I mean, I mean, the thing that really led me ultimately to men's work, I'll just jump right into it, is losing my own father. I lost my father at 22 to suicide. And my dad was the most important person in my life. I was obsessed with him. I loved him. So losing him was a devastating way to start my 20s, to start the time when I was coming out into the world post college or university and feeling like, what am I doing? And now I've also lost my one guide, my most important guide for what I'm doing. And I can get more into it later about the nuance of that. But because I didn't have that framework, I felt super lost. I felt directionless. I kind of I did what I thought or what I was told or what I believed would make me the happiest, right? I moved to the biggest city in America. I kind of chased this upwardly mobile dream that I thought would make me would kind of solve all my problems. And to your point, Adam, I ended up in New York. I ended up writing for men's magazines, just kind of by accident. I was interested in clothes and fashion and style, and I had a couple internships in that world. And met a guy who ended up going over to GQ and ended up getting me a job interview. So I ended up at GQ doing their style blog for GQ.com. And then I started writing for the magazine, and it was pretty high flying world. It was kind of what you might imagine. You know, I don't know if it's ever been portrayed in any movies or anything, but it's the runway shows and the glitz and the glamour for sure. So yeah, I did that. And, you know, the one piece that I took from that is that I really enjoyed speaking to other men. I really enjoyed like connecting to men through that job. In the beginning, it became just telling them where to, you know, get the cool pair of sneakers that they wanted, or how to get their jeans tailored so they looked a little bit more put together. But as I got deeper into that, I realized that it went deeper than that for me. It was like I really enjoyed almost imparting this kind of like big brotherly wisdom to other men about how to make their way in the world. And so as I felt my sort of inner landscape changing around, because essentially I started working in magazines and I burnt out quite fast. It was a fast lifestyle for me at that point in my life, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs. I burnt out after I think I worked at GQ about a year before I hit a wall. I remember I had like walking pneumonia, and I was like coughing up these pebbles of mucus. And I was like, I can't do this shit anymore. I can't like burn the candle at both ends. So I stepped out. And when I stepped out, it was the first time in my life. This was probably like 2012. It was the first time in my life when I really started questioning this trajectory that I had been on, and sort of like what I was doing. I was like, it's kind of that like dark night of the soul moment where you just wake up and you're like, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
You know? And that was the first time I started, you know, kind of going more inward. You know, I'd always enjoyed writing. So I used writing as kind of a tool for self-exploration, and, you know, got really into journaling and self-reflection. And as I started to get into that, I became really passionate about this process that I was in of self-reflection. When my dad passed, I got into therapy, and I can remember in one of my first psychotherapy sessions, I immediately thought, like, what would it be like to be the guy in the other chair? I was fascinated by what it would be like to be him asking me those questions. And so that kind of like lit something for me. And during those years when I started to kind of go on my own self-reflection or like introspection journey, that's when I started to get really passionate about this stuff. And I was like, I got to just start talking about this. I got to start talking about like what's happening for me. So I started doing some writing about that. Some of the same magazines that had hired me to do fashion and stuff hired me to write personal essays, which was like the best deal in the world. Cause I'm like, now I just get to write about my life. And I was kind of unpacking my dad's death and unpacking, you know, all these elements of my childhood and my earliest relationships and romantic relationships. And I was getting to do that. So guys started to take notice. You know, they were like, you used to write about sneakers, and now you're writing about, you know, now you're writing about your dad's passing, and you're writing about all these other things. So
the Eagles.
writing about my dad's love of soft rock. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into this. I literally just started sharing my experience, and guys started taking notice, guys who had followed me from the old world. So, and that's sort of the abbreviated version.
Good for you, man. That's what a journey, but that's really a huge accomplishment to get to where you are now. Like I have so many questions about every stage of what you just shared, but Marc, I don't want to dominate
No, it's fine. I wanted to ask, so it sounds like the seeds of what you're doing now were planted almost right away after your dad's passing. It sounds like you had some therapy sessions where those seeds were planted, but even still, you kind of had to go through this journey to get to where you are now. But it's very interesting to me that you said at one point, even with the fashion writing, you had started to find some joy and found interest in almost being this big brother type. And I just think that's really interesting that you lose your father at such a formidable time in your life, and very quickly you sort of find yourself almost fulfilling that kind of role potentially for other men. feels almost, just hearing the abridged version of it feels that destiny has something to do with all of it.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah, it's beautiful. I have felt that a lot since then. It was like, this was just my path. And, my dad's death helped facilitate that path in such a dramatic way.
I wonder if you can give sort of the elevator pitch version of what a somatic practitioner is and what an embodiment guide is. What does that mean for people who have no idea?
Sure. I mean, the way that I describe it is, at least for me, I spent the majority of my life living up here. I lived in my thoughts. I lived in my strategies. I lived in like what I thought I should be doing, what I thought other people expected me to do, what would get me the best result out there. Right. And early on in my journey, I think, if 2012 was like when I kind of burnt out. By 2015, I was working in New York with probably the first guy who really introduced me to this concept of getting out of my head and getting more into my body. Specifically at that point, getting into my emotions, which were, because of my past with addiction and because of my past with just tending to stuff my feelings down. I had decades of stuff that I had never felt, including, my whole experience with losing my dad. Mm-hmm. So when I got into that particular therapy group, it was at a place called the Psychodrama Institute of New York. When I got into that particular therapy group, the facilitator there was the first guy that kind of gave me the rundown on like how to really like be with and stay with my emotions, in a group setting. Something that was really powerful. I think as a man, like being witnessed in these emotions that always felt off limits to me as a kid, like rage, and like deep grief. And I found that as I felt my feelings, I did feel more connected to my body. Somatic is just, connecting to the body. It's connecting to feeling. And so when I say that I'm a somatic practitioner and embodiment guide, I'm actually working with my clients to get them into their bodies, because I find that, for most men, we typically have often decades of stuff that we have never felt, little nuanced stuff all the way up to like very big things, like entire like events, like maybe our parents' divorce, or, something that happened in a romantic relationship when we were young that was really hurtful to us, or, any of these type of traumatic events, down to like just micro stuff from when we were a kid. I find that a lot of us have that stuff unprocessed. So when I work with guys, we're actually getting into and processing and really integrating some of this stuff, which I find it leads to a lot more freedom, a lot more ease, a lot more peace in life.
Does everybody have some degree of trauma that they could benefit from processing and working through?
I believe so. I believe that life is traumatic by nature. And again, for some people, it might just be those micro traumas. It might just be the little things when we were kids, right? Like, the moment when these things can be pre-verbal. It could be like the time we needed our mom to come in and give us attention. And instead we were left in the dark because she was on the phone. We find some really, we find some interesting things when we go in there, and it's not always the things that we might guess.
Yeah. So some of these things is like, we don't have even the slightest clue that they're even there.
I mean, are these repressed things? Like, how do you even go about discovering those things? If you were pre-verbal and you don't have a memory of it that you can extract, how do you even go about digging that up, uncovering that, remembering that?
Yeah, it's a great question. In the work that I do with men, we literally start with a feeling. So we use what's available to us in the everyday, right? So if a guy comes into a session and he says, "Hey, this happened at work. I'm feeling super angry about it." I'm like, let's go into the anger. Close your eyes. Where do you feel that anger in your body? My chest. Okay, what does it feel like in your chest? What's the sensation? It's hot. It's, like we track the feeling. And I found by to answer your question, Adam, like to get into some of these older traumas, like we just start with the triggers that are happening in life now. So if something is triggering me anger in the present day, it's gonna lead back to anger that I haven't felt before. If something's triggering me sadness in present day, it's going to lead me back to sadnesses that I haven't felt. And it's a process too. It's like digging, it's like mining. It's like we're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And we start somewhere up here, and then, it's crazy by the time we get down to doing some of the deeper work, because I do a lot of work with plant medicine with guys as well. Sometimes when we get into the deeper stuff, into the deep like somatic integration on plant medicine, we're talking like stuff that's like down in the hips, in the groin area, like stuff that is like super stuffed away. It's fascinating.
It's super fascinating.
Yeah. Do you find that men sort of suffer from a lot of the same stuff as one another? Like, do you find common themes among men?
1000%. Yeah. Personally, as I've heard stories from clients, one of the most reassuring things about coming into a men's group or like working with a male facilitator who's sharing about his life is feeling like, oh my God, I thought I was the only guy that was like suffering from this. And now I realize that this is almost a universal thing. Like if it's not the same event, right? Like we all have different events on the surface, but when you boil it down to a feeling level, we're dealing with like 4-5 core feelings, And so everybody, every man that I work with it's like when we boil it down, there's so much similarity. It's like we're so much more similar than we are different.
This podcast in particular, obviously it's parenting themed. And so our listeners majority of them are dads. We have some moms who listen to, which we think is awesome. But with the men who you coach who are dads, what are some of the common themes among those guys that are connected to being a father?
One that comes up immediately is wanting to give their kids a different experience than they had. Wanting to be a father who is able to connect more on an emotional level with his kids. And a lot of times, I'll have guys who have older kids as well already. And, they might be looking back and realizing like, hey, I didn't do this the way I wanted to. Like, how can I connect to them now? How can I own how I showed up in the past and move forward in a way that feels more positive and more connected? Because one thing that I'll say quickly is a lot of the work that I do with men is to unravel a disconnected relationship from their dad. I mean, men's work, as we call it in general, is like so much of that work is like because guys didn't feel connected to their dads.
So I was reading one of your articles. You told this little story that you said in this article that changed your relationship with anger forever. You went on to say that now you embrace it as the human emotion that it is. And I read that. A couple things made me pause in that article, but I read that and it at first, when I first read it, like at face value, I was like, well, feels like paradoxical. Like isn't anger supposed to be one of those emotions that you're like, you have it, but then you're like, okay, get away from that because it's not good. I just wonder if you can sort of tell a little bit of that story that you told in that article and then maybe just unpack a little bit of what you mean when you say anger being a healthy human emotion.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, this story was, I was in a men's group with a buddy of mine, a guy I met in grad school. And because I had the relationship with my dad that I did, and because I lost him in the way I didn't have a lot of trust with men. I had to do major repair work on my trust with men, and I'm still doing it. But at this particular juncture, I remember the trigger for me was if I felt like a man wasn't listening to me or wasn't really hearing me, I would just fucking blow up. And so I was in a men's group with my buddy Juan And I just felt like he wasn't hearing me, and I lost it. And, and, it says something about the safety of that men's group that I felt because I felt like I could really let that out, because that wasn't comfortable for me, Mark, to be angry, so it said something about the container that we had built all together, over those years, that I felt like I could even express that to Juan. But I'll always remember it. I expressed it and I felt terrible. I immediately shame shower, just like, I'm the worst person in the world. Why did I do that? I just lost my composure. Everyone thinks I'm a fool, etc. Right on down the line. And I remember at the end of the group, Juan came over to me and he just gave me a huge hug. And he's like, I like that side of you. He's like, I like when you get fiery. I wish it wasn't directed at me, but I like that side of you. Right. And I just remember breaking down in tears. I had this huge healing around anger, and he's Argentinian, so he's a little bit used to that kind of more fiery, like machismo culture, but that was such a big healing for me with him. And what I mean when I say that anger is a healthy emotion is, I think my experience with doing men's work is that most guys, when they come into men's work, have only experienced rage. They haven't experienced healthy anger expressed. In my experience now, I could express anger to you without even raising my voice. I could just say, Mark, when you said that, it really hurt me. I feel angry. And that would be anger. And then it would be out of me. Right. But again, to go back to Adam, to your question, if I'm dealing with 3 decades of repressed anger, right, and someone presses my button, they're going to get a volcano. They're not going to get, Mark, that really pissed me off. I really didn't like when you said that. They're going to get, the road rage. They're going to get the violence. They're going to get the verbal abuse, etc. So I find that a part of men's work is often, for many men, especially guys who are more like me, like the more of a nice guy, people pleaser type archetype. Like I feel like with working with men like me, we often have to drain that tank of the repressed feelings to get to the point when I could just have something happen in the present day and not completely blow up over it. My journey around this personally was, I had so much rage inside me that was unexpressed, and I worked on it for years. And, it's only at this point now when I feel like something can happen, like with my girlfriend, or something can happen with a friend of mine, and something can piss me off. And I can just tell them, I could just say, that hurt me when you did that. I felt angry with you, instead of blowing up. I hope that answers your question, but
it does. Yeah. I mean, just the notion that rage and anger are different from one another and not the same, maybe two sides of the same coin, but not exactly the same. And even just hearing that, is enough to sort of give me pause and kind of make me think about it a little bit in a way that I really hadn't before. I'm digging into this just personally, because for me, I think this is one of those areas that really, ever since becoming a dad, I don't think I realized that I even really had anger in me, frankly, and it's one of those things that have sort of, even, my wife will tell you too, she's seeing sides of me that she hasn't seen before. And we were married for quite a while before we had kids. So she saw a lot of me, emotionally. So it's an interesting thing to me, thinking that there's a version of anger that you can have and feel, and it can be done in a healthy way.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat, really, like you, Sean. I am a people pleaser and kind of a diplomat, and I like trying to make peace between two people who maybe are at odds with one another. And I don't like negative confrontations, and I will do it if I need to, but it stresses me the fuck out. And I was reading in one of your articles, I can't remember the exact context, but it was about ruffling feathers and how it's kind of against our nature as men to want to ruffle feathers, but how it's not necessarily a bad thing. But on the theme of anger, like in the context of fatherhood, just like you said, Mark, like my kids can get me like really pissed off, and I try to handle it just like your example, Sean, where I let them know why I'm pissed off and keep my composure. But like occasionally when it's like the 15th time that I've told them not to do something and they're not listening, and I feel like they're being disrespectful to me as the parental figure, like, yeah, I raise my voice and I get like, and I want them to know that I'm irritated, but I don't feel like that kind of behavior is necessarily helpful or healthy. So I'm just trying to rationalize like what the difference is between that kind of unhelpful expression of anger and something that actually is beneficial and healthy.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to you guys, because I having children is a surefire way to tap into that, man. I admire all the dads out there so much. I want to get there myself one day, and I'm glad that I've done a bunch of this work before getting there. But I really, really just acknowledge the full breadth of what that takes to raise kids. I have raised pets, and I got very angry at them, and they are not speaking to me. So. Right.
Yeah, you talked a little bit ago about in your story with Juan that there's a trigger that you have that you noticed, and that's one of the things that came as a shock to me after becoming a dad, was realizing that I even had triggers. That wasn't something that I'd thought about before or ever noticed before. And even tonight, I mean, it's like there's some examples that I look at sort of like objectively or after the fact, you know, in like a bit of a post-mortem kind of way. I mean, it's like, damn, what a silly thing. But it's like, yeah, if my kid flicks the light switch up, like on and off, just willy-nilly for no reason, evidently that's a trigger for me. Rage. You know, yeah, and I can fly off the handle up at stuff like that. I mean, not like I'm not like knocking down walls or anything, but I am at the bottom of the steps and in my head going, "What the fuck are you doing? Why in God's name would you ever do that?" You know, and it's just. But notice, I feel like at least it seems like being aware and trying to figure out at least what some of those triggers are kind of feels like a good, important early step, you know?
Yeah. Awareness is always the first step to any of this stuff, right? Just the noticing. I mean, I know, like, you know, a lot of people are into like mindfulness, right? And to me, mindfulness is literally just becoming aware, watching yourself, observing when the light switch gets flicked, like what happens, right? It's definitely the first step, because it's like without awareness, you can't get to ownership, and ownership is necessary for any of this stuff. It's like I have to own my behavior in order to, you know, be willing to look at it and unpack it more.
So my next step is ownership.
I
gotta own being a complete jerk about the light switch.
You did, man. That sounded like ownership to me.
Okay. All right. I'll take it.
So one of the things that you offer for men who sign on to coach with you is these retreats, in-person retreats. And when we were trying to schedule this episode, you were going to be in the desert for a week with a group of men. I would love to hear what do those sessions look like? What does an average day in one of those retreats look like when you're in the desert with a group of guys and who are all, you know, there for this shared purpose? What is the format of that?
You know, it's cool because the timing is great on that, because we actually, the focus of this retreat was a lot around the father and masculine, you know, masculine energy in general, and just our relationship with men through our lives. Like, what was your relationship like with other boys in middle school, Adam? Like when we were together, like what was your relationship like with other young men in college? What was your relationship like with your dad? So one of the things that we did to kick off the first day is we did an exercise where the guys paired off together and they went through a series of questions where they got to both speak to their father and be spoken to by their father, the other man as their father. And it was so powerful. Like I had done something like that years ago, but I mean, the guys really embraced it and they really got into it. And there's something about having your words, like the words that you would put, you know, coming from your dad being spoken to you by another man back to you. I mean, to me, that was like the really powerful part. And yeah, you know, we did a lot of work around sort of that key dad relationship. And, you know, when we circled up and went around, like out of the 10 guys there, over half their father is not with them anymore. And with some hasn't been there for years. So every time I get together with a group of men, like I'm really always reminded of the impact of that father relationship and how that just those tendrils run all through life.
Is it ever too late to begin the process of working on yourself?
No. It's beneficial, I think, at any age. And I would say just because of the way that things are and how mainstream therapy has become, you know, destigmatized, some of these things have become, I feel like it's starting younger, but a lot of the guys that I know didn't get into this stuff, you know, until their 40s, 50s, even 60s. And it is definitely not too late. I mean, I have seen just beautiful things with men with grown kids, the work that they've done on themselves, like rewiring those relationships, you know, building, you know, kind of putting an end to the old relationship and having like this whole rebirth and new connection with their kids, initiated by either them or the kids as they begin to change and shift with how they show up with their kids. So I definitely not. You can't do it wrong.
Therapy is never something that I have pursued myself, but I do think that there is value to literally anybody to just get in and take time to reflect on your own experience. Are you a big meditator? Do you do a lot of that?
There have been times in my life when I've meditated a lot. You know, I had a bunch of years where I was like, you know, really like spiritually seeking, you know, especially after losing my dad and stuff. Like I was looking for answers. And there were times when I did a lot of meditation and, you know, got heavy into Buddhism and some of these other things. I don't currently like, you know, do classic meditation, but I do things that feel like meditation to me, whether it's just doing some writing and kind of dropping into a nice space with that, like letting the distractions fall away, or even just, you know, I live in Southern California, so going on a nice hike and just getting lost in nature and just, you know, reflecting, those feel meditative to me.
Whether it's doing an activity or sitting alone by yourself in silence or doing a guided meditation, I mean, there's just something about tuning out all of the noise and just focusing on centering. It's obviously so beneficial in so many ways. Any like books or podcasts, authors that you really like? For dads listening, like definitely we'll include a link in the episode notes to your website, SeanHotchkiss.com, your social media, so they can learn more about you and what you're doing. But are there any other resources that would just be a great like first step for dads who are interested in exploring this stuff more?
You know, there back in the 80s and 90s, there was a whole movement that was called the mythopoetic men's movement. And it was like a wave of guys who all got really interested in this stuff, you know, specifically male psychology and kind of like experiences that, to take it back to your question from the beginning, Mark, like a lot of men share, like just universal stuff that men share. And there was a guy who, he passed away a couple years ago, but he was the biggest figure in that movement. This guy, Robert Bly, B-L-Y. And he wrote a book called Iron John, which is kind of a cool introduction into masculine psychology and sort of this inward journey. He put it through, you know, again, this was based around myths. So it was like very Joseph Campbell, kind of like that, you know, hero with 1,000 faces kind of stuff. But Robert Bly's book, specifically Iron John, is very helpful, I think, for men starting out on this path. And There's a guy named Connor Beaton who has a website called Man Talks. He's a good he's a good introduction to this work for the modern guy.
Is there anything else that like we haven't talked about that you expected to be asked about or that you would like to share with dads listening?
One thing that I'd like to impart to dads is we've been looking at a lot of kind of the ramifications of what happens if really present, like good fathering isn't happening, right? Like we've been looking at a lot of like more, I would say like the wound side, but like on the other side, like, which I'm sure you guys cover all the time, like good stuff to do with your kids. Like something that comes up for me a lot. I'm doing a training right now with this organization called Sons Youth. And it's a teen and young man initiation rites of passage program. And something that I feel really passionate about is like, how do we work with the young men and the boys now so that they're not trudging into the therapist's office at 50 being like, screw my dad, that whole thing. So, to the dads who are listening, like, creating some sort of connection point or like traditions or some kind of thing that would feel a little like rite of passagey specifically for your boys. I think it's more tailored to father and son. But there are also versions of this that happen with father and daughter as well. Because I know, Adam, you have 2 daughters, but I think for dads, it's those things that if I think back, right. There's like those things that are like those core memories or connection points, like invitations into new phases in life, whether that's like around the time of puberty or like teenagehood, like even just honoring that in some way. Right. Because if I think about the average teenage boy, I think there's a hunger to feel seen and to feel acknowledged as he moves through life and not just be kind of like discarded. Oh, parents come home from work and like, have you done your homework? Okay. Have you eaten dinner? Great. Like moving on, like really seeing him in some way. So I feel like, something that I want to impart is like, it's just thinking about how dads could create those connection points with kids so that it feels like they're witnessing them moving through these like very important stages of life that are often challenging, to our point about middle school, I think back to that time and like all I ever wanted was like, I wanted someone to like help me. I wanted like a manual. I wanted like a guidebook. I wanted someone to listen to me. I wanted to be able to talk about scary things and have them well received and not have my parents like want to run in the other direction. Yeah. So that feels like a passion for me as I think about just, talking to dads.
So much food for thought in this conversation. I guess for that, I just thank you, for coming on and chatting with us and talking about this stuff and just in your life and your profession, making a space, that's dedicated for this kind of discussion and exploration. I think it's great.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I just love it. That's I appreciated that reflection earlier, Marc, when you said, this kind of feels like something to do with destiny, right? Like I agree. I mean, it's something that I feel so passionate about. I couldn't imagine not doing. So thank you for giving me the forum to just, spit about it for 53 minutes.
Dads listening, follow Sean on social media. I think you're going to be pretty inspired by the content that he puts out. And I hope that this conversation has been enlightening in some ways and has got you reflecting on your own life. Sean, it's been super nice catching up with you. I hope to stay in better touch, and I'm really excited sincerely to continue following along with what you're doing because it really is just it's like mind expanding. So I'm grateful to have had this time with you.
Thank you guys so much.
Do we have time for a recurring?
You got something?
I don't have anything. Let me look at my phone.
You do. You always have something at the ready.
No.
If you pull up your notes app, I guarantee there's an awesome did I just say that out loud waiting to go.
Maybe. Hold on. Just give me a minute here. All right, hold on. Kisses and tisses. Hold on. I don't remember what this is from. Usually I write these with like a little context. You know, like this was what was going on at this time.
Well, let's both just have a laugh, not knowing how and when and why.
What it says is one was getting into the other space, and the one that was whose space was being gotten into went right to yelling about it. And this is a problem that we have all the time, right? It's like small infraction. One commits a small whatever against the other, and this one in particular, he goes right just to absolute
fire,
off
vengeance.
the wall screaming, you know. And so we were trying to get him to use his words to sort of like diffuse the situation. But when one of those things happen and you go right skyrocket to screaming, the only way to cut through the noise is to also yell at a loud volume or speak at a loud volume.
Unfortunately.
And of course, it's like both my wife and I like in there together, you know, and you end up just saying at such an absurdly loud volume, like kind of ridiculous things a lot of the time. And apparently what I yelled was, now I'm screaming this, and everyone else is also screaming. You got to tell him with your words that, quote, right now I'm trying to have a little alone time with my book on my vent. Okay, I think I remember this now. It was cold.
Okay.
And we have a vent in the kitchen, like a floor vent that heat comes out of. My one son was trying, like each morning he would, because I don't know if it's a New England thing or what, but they wear like shorts, no shirts all year long, like in the house.
Right. So you sit down on the vent.
So he's getting like crisscross applesauce on the vent. I remember. Yeah. And he's like just trying to sit there and chill. And his brother was just pestering him.
Yeah. I need a little alone time on my vent.
Right now I'm trying to have a little alone time with my book on my vent.
And then you thought, did I just say that out loud?
Did I just say that out loud? You got to put that at the beginning.
It was a good one.
Thanks for listening to Modern Dadhood. Please consider leaving a rating or a review wherever you listen, be it Apple Podcasts,
Spotify,
not Stitcher,
Amazon Music, Pocket
Hark
Casts,
Audio,
Hark Audio, or wherever you listen. You can find, again, all episodes at moderndadhood.com. And here's some other things you can do there. You can buy yourself or a loved one a Modern Dadhood t-shirt, or we call it a dad hoodie. You can sign up for our email list to be alerted when we have new episodes. You can find all of our social media links like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. Yeah.
Go to YouTube.
Yeah.
Fun stuff going on there on YouTube these days. Did you say the email? Hey, HEY @moderndadhood.com. You can write in to be like, guys, you're awesome. Talk more about this. I wish I could hear more about these things, this topic, whatever.
I have a connection to Barack Obama if you want him as a guest on the show.
I am Barack Obama.
I am Lin-Manuel Miranda. I am Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
I am The Rock. We have a list. Guys, we have a list. Listeners, we have a list, okay? There's people we're trying to get. Some of them are hard. Adam does a fantastic job of getting amazing guests on this show. Some of them have eluded us to date, but we'll keep working on them.
We sure will.
What else? Thank you to Casper Baby Pants and Spencer Albee for the show music. Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on. I said that weird.
It's fine.
For the music on the show.
Everybody knows. Thanks to Sean Hotchkiss.
Can't forget Sean.
Who I've not seen since high school. And why don't you do your final thank you that you always do in every episode?
Finally, thank you for listening.
Podcast. Just a modern.